Hello, welcome to this session. The title of this session is Film Soundscape. A soundscape is the totality of sonic elements in a specific natural or artificial, territorial or virtual environment. The soundscape of a particular environment is generally described according to human perception, as animal perception of sound could be entirely different from that of human perception. In a soundscape, the properties like volume, pitch, tempo, frequency, etc. of each acoustic element might vary at different temporal moments. Any auditory element that breaches silence can be called a sound. A sound is generally understood in opposition to silence. Learning objectives: to enable the learner to understand the concept of soundscape, to comprehend various factors which decide a soundscape, to understand and differentiate various elements of film soundscape, and to comprehend and appreciate cinema with special reference to soundscape. Any undesired or unwanted sound fragment in a particular acoustic ecology is generally described as a noise. The concept of noise is subjective and circumstantial specific. In an unambiguously designed acoustic ecology, noise removal and reduction requires great effort and carries great relevance. Arrival of newer technological devices brings in newer sonic segments, adding on to the existing soundscape. Similarly, the disappearance of existing technological devices causes the extinction of certain sonic segments from the existing soundscape. Just as the landscape of a terrain, the soundscape of that particular terrain would be unique and definitive of that particular location. The soundscape is the sonic identity card of a place. The International Standardization Organization, ISO, defines a soundscape as an, I quote, acoustic environment as perceived or experienced and or understood by a person or people in context, unquote. Theoretically, a soundscape can be classified into three: biophony, geophony, and anthrophony. Biophony refers to the entire gamut of natural sound produced by flora and fauna. Geophony refers to the sonic emissions by natural elements, and anthrophony stands for artificial sounds created by devices invented by human beings, including musical instruments. According to the ISO, the Canadian author, eco-activist and composer R. Murray Schafer coined the word soundscape. Murray Schafer is an internationally reputed sound theorist, especially in the context of music pedagogy. Apart from the term soundscape, Schafer introduced another term, schizophonia, to refer to the separation of sound from its maker. Schizophonia also refers to the condition caused by the separation or split of the sound from its maker. According to Schafer, I quote, "We have split the sound from the maker of the sound. Sounds have been torn from their natural sockets and given an amplified and independent existence. Vocal sound, for instance, is no longer to a hole in the head, but is free to issue from anywhere in the landscape," unquote. Such separated or split sounds from their natural sources could be recontextualized as well as recombined, making sound engineering an academic discipline itself. We are always immersed in and surrounded by different soundscapes at different times in one locality. Soundscapes vary when we move from one locality to another. The process of adding a soundtrack to a movie is technically known as scoring. Scoring enhances the emotional ambience and progress of the plot of the film in general. The scoring process could be either by magnetic recording or digital recording. Right from the time of the Lumiere cinema of the 19th century, cinema has never been actually silent. The screenings of silent films in the early stages were done often with the accompaniment of live orchestra in theatre. Rick Altman suggests that, I quote, "The early cinema soundscape was heavily slanted towards audiovisual matching, conditioned by a widely disseminated tradition of descriptive music. Early cinema audiences harbored expectations of a connection between the audio and the visual portions of the program. Even musical accompaniment for films made cinema into a multimedia affair. Descriptive music was creating expectations of connection between audio and the visual portions of the program. Audiences accustomed to close audiovisual connections paid particular attention to visual representations of sound sources." Unquote. Contemporary cinema, especially science fiction films or sci-fi films, makes use of computer-generated sounds also. So film soundscape ranges from the natural sounds to orchestra-composed sounds to computer-generated special effect sounds. Cinema soundscapes refers to all the sonic waves that we experience while watching a movie. Generally, only those sound elements recorded and embedded in the soundtrack of a movie are considered as part of a movie soundscape. However, the extra cinematic sonic elements present within the projection theater, such as the purring of the projector and air conditioner vents, sounds of electric fans, noise created by the spectators, etc., also can be considered under cinema soundscape. A movie sound designer is an important and integral part of contemporary film crew. Now let's briefly discuss some of the various functions of a cinematic soundscape. Defining a location. In cinema, locational shifts are often suggested by changing the soundscape. A city will have an entirely different soundscape than that of a village. The outdoor locational soundscape could be different from that of an indoor location. Even in a particular space, soundscape varies as per the positioning of different characters in the movie. For example, the soundscape created to describe a character who sits in a closed car will be different from that of the soundscape to describe a traffic policeman who knocks at the car window from outside. Defining a time. A cinema soundscape has a critical role in describing the changing temporal environment of films. Temporal changes include seasonal time change, clock time change, and changes from day to night. A factory siren in cinema generally indicates either morning or evening. Soundscape of a location at dawn and dusk would be radically different. Defining a mood. Mainstream commercial cinema thrives on manipulating human emotions at various points of the real time. Along with right visuals, equally right sound elements could enhance or reduce both the characters as well as the audience's moods while watching the film. A sequence of celebration in cinema will be boosted by a thrilling soundtrack. The pathos of loss at the death of a dear one in cinema is enhanced with an equally sad soundtrack. Defining a character. Universally, human speech and verbal mannerisms vary from person to person. In cinema, the creation of a unique character with specific linguistic accent, style, and tempo are very challenging. Both the verbal and non-verbal sounds generated by a character in cinema becomes an inseparable part of that character's personality.
वह मुंह तो खोल, नाम बता। अरे तेरा तो नाम है। चुप, एकदम।
However, as cinema is a patriarchal industry dominated by male superstars and male spectators, the replacement of a male superstar's soundtrack with another man's dubbed sound cannot be even imagined. Think of, in the Indian context, Amitabh Bachchan or any other superstar's peculiar sound replaced with another male sound. In the context of Indian cinema again, most often, the sounds of heroines are often dubbed by different dubbing artists in different films. Developing film narrative. Film narrative or cinematic plot often progresses through dialogues. Therefore, dialogues in cinema often form a major quantity of cinema soundscape.
चौपाटी पे हरीश के स्टॉल पे पानी पूरी कितने की है?
क्या?
एक प्लेट पानी पूरी कितने की होगी?
10 रुपए की।
गलत, 15 रुपए की, दिवाली से। किसी ने हवलदार वर्मा की साइकिल चुराई थी सांता क्रूज स्टेशन से पिछले हफ्ते।
तू जानता है कौन तो?
जुहू में सब लोग जानते हैं।
Cinematic voiceovers also take the narrative forward. In the silent era cinema, as mentioned earlier, intertitles were used to suggest further temporal and spatial development of cinematic plots, providing further information. Cinema is a highly compressed work of art created with many layers of multifarious audio, visual, and textual elements. Using soundtracks, the audience can be provided with further information on the impending dangers like tempest, air raid, attack, etc. A neutral visual shot can be converted into an image with a specific emotion and meaning with the aid of appropriate soundtrack. Expanding situational meaning. Film soundscape provides clues to situational meaning in cinema. Even a specific situational cinematic meaning can be subverted by an opposite meaning soundtrack. Serious situations are often rendered into comic and vice versa by inserting appropriate sound element in cinema. The visual beauty of a cinematic shot or sequence can be enhanced like anything by the insertion of an equally appealing sound element. Creation of an acoustic aesthetics. Film soundscape provides a filmmaker to create a unique acoustic aesthetics. A particular jingle associated with a particular film or a particular character from a particular film often takes the cinema to an auditory iconic status. In the creation of a film's unique identity, soundscape plays a very significant role. A movie can be critically analyzed and aesthetically appreciated on the sole basis of its soundscape also. Film texture, narrative, visual idiom, and acoustic aesthetics collaboratively make a movie an integral work of art. Just like cinematic visuals, cinematic soundscape also confines the audience to the immersive environment of cinematic apparatus. Sounds too can dominate over spectator. Sophisticated modern acoustic theater architectonics and sound design contribute to the sonic incarceration of a filmic spectator. The more noise is reduced in a film soundscape, the more acoustically immersive and fine and dominant will be the film. Following are the major sonic elements which can be heard in a film soundscape. Dialogue sound. As in mainstream theatre, dialogues and monologues by characters constitute the major chunk of a film's soundtrack. It's primarily through the dialogue between or among characters the cinematic narrative is taken forward in talkies. As mentioned earlier, in the case of silent era films, often the insertion of intertitles were aimed at achieving a dialogue-like situation. Film dialogues provide enough information to the audience so that they can follow the storyline. Foley sound. Foley sounds refers to sound generated by common everyday actions like unlocking the lock, starting a vehicle, sound of footsteps, sounds of explosion and gunfire, etc.
जमाल जल्दी से बाहर निकल प्रकाश को ज्यादा है अभी पूरी खत्म नहीं होती अमिताभ का हेलीकॉप्टर अमिताभ
Foley sounds are not normally captured while shooting but added to the track from a sound library. But Foley sounds bring in more realism into movies. It enhances the realistic ambience of a film. The phrase Foley sound was derived from the name of the American sound engineer Jack Donovan Foley. Diegetic and non-diegetic sound. If the source of a sound element could be located or visible or suggested within a particular cinematic moment or frame, it can be called a diegetic sound. For example, in a particular scene, if the character in the film is shown watching a television, the sound coming from the television can be a diegetic sound. A diegetic sound is an actual or real sound which fits with the visuals on screen.
Assistant from Mumbai, Chaiwala, for 2 crore rupees.
On the contrary, if the source of that particular sonic element in the film is not shown or not implied by a particular cinematic scene, such sounds belong to the category of non-diegetic sound. Most often, music used to create moods in films belong to the non-diegetic category. It has to be noted that at times a non-diegetic sound can turn diegetic in the adjacent sequence or adjacent frame. And a diegetic sound could also lose its diegetic status and thus become a non-diegetic one in the next sequence. Synchronous and asynchronous sound. Any sound element, including a music score or Foley sound, which is compatible with the situation or mood or the lip movement of character or object in a movie scene is a synchronous sound. A synchronous sound could be recorded on location or dubbed in theatre studio. A synchronous sound could be recorded on location or dubbed in a sound studio. If an incompatible soundtrack is used in a particular situation, it becomes an asynchronous sound. For instance, if the sound of a moving truck is used with some other music element, it becomes an asynchronous sound. Synchronized music sounds recorded on soundtracks of the films started its appearance in films from 1926 with the release of the American film Don Juan 1926. It was directed by Alan Crosland, but it had no synchronized dialogue track. Only with the release of Alan Crosland's The Jazz Singer in 1927, the usage of synchronized dialogue soundtracks in movies began. He was using the Vitaphone sound recording device.
Wonderful pals are always hard to find. Some folks have one.
Special effect sound. To accompany normal situations in cinema, sonic elements suggestive of natural origin are generally used. However, in sci-fi films and cartoon films and animation films, such natural sound elements would not fit in many circumstances. In such situations, artificially created or combined score, electronically or computer-generated sound elements are often used. Such sounds are known as special effect sound. We do not have natural counterpart to special effect sounds. Jingle. A unique short tune used to define a particular person or situation or product is called a jingle. In movies, the entry of certain characters could be accompanied by a specific sonic tune which defines the general temperament of that particular situation or character. These particular sound tracks are known as jingles. Similarly, at times, a specific situation can be created by a jingle. For instance, a comic turnout of a serious situation. A jingle is the crispiest sonic description of a cinematic character or situation. A jingle often brands a place or a character in cinema. Another most important features of narrative stylistics of Indian cinema produced in all languages of India is the employment of song and dance sequences. Bollywood cinema is globally popular for its excellent movie music and dance. Even when the filmic plot has nothing to do with music and dance, Indian cinema invariably uses song and dance either to divert the narrative further or to provide a Brechtian break during cinematic narrative. However, songs and dances at times have certain narrative function to perform, like the compression of the story, compression of the time, enhancement of the emotional factor, deeper depiction of a character, etc. Song and dance sequences in Indian cinema significantly contribute to the box office revenue. Film song and dance, cut off from the body of the movie in audio and video format respectively, has a huge market value in the Indian culture industry. The following quote from Los Angeles Film School provides insights on the importance of sound in a film. I quote, "Films are produced using three types of sounds: human voices, music, and sound effects. These three types of sounds are crucial for a film to feel realistic for the audience. Sounds and dialogues must perfectly sync with the actions in a film without delay and must sound the way they look. If a sound doesn't quite match the action on screen, the action itself isn't really as believable. One way to achieve believable, high quality sounds is to use original sound clips rather than relying on solely on sound libraries for sound effects. Another way to make a film more believable using sound is to incorporate what are known as asynchronous sound effects, often in the form of background sounds. These sounds do not directly correlate to the action occurring in a scene, but they can bring a film to life. Including sounds typical of a city or rural area can help to make the film's setting more realistic. Unquote. Distinct soundscapes are often created in the context of genre movies. The soundscape created for a western will not be compatible or matching for a noir film or an expressionist film. Similarly, the soundscape of a sci-fi movie will not be fitting for a romantic comedy drama film. An epic genre requires a different kind of soundscape. To sum up, the soundscape of each movie will be unique, just like the soundscape of a particular territorial place. Thank you for watching.